Jolie, you have the people in attendance, and let me just backtrack for a second. Jen sent in the article that I was reading. It said, "Oh yeah, the education committee is going to take this up on Wednesday." I'm like, "Oh, okay." There's an alert to me that I have to go take a look. So I looked up the education committee's agenda, and I saw that all this stuff was going on. Since that time, so I don't have to rely on a chance reading in the newspaper. I've gone on to the General Assembly website, and I've signed up for having updates for when the education committee is going to meet with their agendas, et cetera, et cetera. So that'll give me some advance notice, which will be good. Having gone on to the agenda when I came in on Monday, I looked to see what bills were going to be on and which ones would have been of interest to us, ones that we have previously discussed. And what I started to do is I started to write like a letter. And then I kind of thought to myself, well, I know in the past what we've done is we've developed a letter once the legislative committee has decided this is a topic we want to comment on, and this is the comment we want to make. And then what we always do is we send it to the executive committee, because the executive committee is the one that gives the green light to send it. And there's been times when we've done that and they've made some edits or some suggestions or whatever. And that's a good collaborative way of doing it. So it goes out that way. The unfortunate thing was, like, our legislative committee was meeting today and the education committee was yesterday. So I figured, okay, let me just do the best I can. So I started to put together a letter to try to get it out to everybody to see if we could do it in ahead of time. But then it struck me is, like, I didn't really know where some people were going to come down on some of this stuff. Like, for example, on the issue of the seclusion, thinking what I started to do was to get a feel for the stuff that was out there. I started reading all the different commentary was there. And then I was getting a chance to see the balanced discussion on the seclusion. Like you were saying, Brian, should there be a time when we might be able to have seclusion for the good of the child or other children in the room, et cetera. So I kind of then hit the pause button on my letter and I just kind of threw it out there figuring, all right, let's get some people to comment. So then in the advance of, and I feel really bad. This was like a really tough week for me as far as work goes. And, but what I also did then was this morning, just in front of this meeting, I sent a note out to the liaison, Laura, to try to get some input from her. I put you guys on copy, I believe, and I don't know if you had a chance to read it, but basically I was asking her, I go, hey, there was the hearing yesterday and there was public commentary. Are we still able to comment at this point? How do we go about doing that? And so I'll read for you what she wrote back to me. She goes, yesterday was just a public hearing, so no votes were taken on the bills on the agenda. If the committee chairs decide to move them forward, they will be placed on a committee meeting agenda at a later date. You can monitor the calendar at Connecticut General Assembly website. She gave me a link to see when future meetings of the Education Committee are scheduled, which I had done before receiving this. The agenda is usually posted 24 hours in advance and will list the bills they will be considering. So that's like a real, quick kick. We're going to have to be really on top of it. As for testimony, I'm not positive how long after the hearing that you could still submit, but you should reach out to the committee clerk. And she gives a name and contact if you have any questions about that or any other part of the process moving forward. So I will be following up on that and asking about the potential for filing, post public hearing commentary, just to get our voice in there. I would also, the question I have is, I'm going to get back to the liaison, Laura, on this. Her last name is Stefan, and I'm going to get back to her and I'm going to say, the committee chairs decide to move them forward. So Brian, you might know this without me even having to ask her. I mean, so you've had the bills that are up for review. You've had the testimony. According to the speaker schedule from yesterday, there was 176 speakers that were lined up. You've had that. And then Laura is saying that the committee chairs then decide, which ones are going to move forward. Do they have to convene a meeting for that? Or is it just there's the chairs, and then there was the two co-chairs, and then there was I forget what the name they call them. I don't know. There's two others, kind of like vice chairs or so in a way. How do they go about doing that? Do you know?
I'm not sure the exact process, Jeff, if there's a meeting with the full ed committee on that once they're reviewing all the information. So I don't know the particulars on that end of things, but Laura's email response is really critical in that, you know, when there will be public information and knowledge on when they're voting on those different pieces. Right now, in between those times, what could happen is the legislators could reach out for additional information. There could be adjustments in the language made. I don't know what structures they use, though, to be able to make those decision points.
Yeah, I'm going to try to explore that. And then the other thing is on the education committee, there's a rep from Norwalk that I had reached out to at the beginning of the year to introduce. I mean, she knows me, who I am, but I just wanted to let her know that in addition to being here in Norwalk, I'm also on this committee. And I wanted to let her know, hey, congratulations, I look forward to working with you. And she sent me back a nice note, hey. So I was also thinking I could reach out to her personally. I'm assuming that we can reach out to some of these. In addition, so if you go onto the Connecticut General Assembly website and you go over to the Education Committee page, there's like a little tab there that allows you to submit testimony, and it has like a form you can fill in. I support, I don't support. You can put your comments, etc. So you could always do that, and I guess that would go into the general pool of stuff online. I don't know if it goes directly to the committee members or just go online for them to look at. But what I would do is, if we want to come up with a thing, I would also send a copy directly to the person from Norwalk. And is it considered to be okay for us, in addition to submitting the form, to actually putting the specific legislators on copy? I mean, I imagine we can do that, right?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to do that.
Right, so we could do that. So I think what we have to do here is to decide which bills we want to.
So when I was working on bills with the Governor's Advisory Council of Deaf, Hard of Hearing, and Deafblind, after we got our one voice and our elevator speech on different subjects, then we personally each reached out to our own legislators with that voice. So that's how we did it. I literally went up to the Capitol and knocked on doors and asked to speak to people and reached out to people. But as long as we had that elevator speech and the one voice, the minute the voice wasn't one, legislators would get very unhappy because they didn't know who they were supposed to be supporting or listening to. And then they kind of back away because they don't want to be involved if people are in conflict. So that's why that wonderful thing that you want to put together, that little one voice, whatever points you think need to be made the most. And I am not an expert on restraint and seclusion at all. But if we had that one voice, I could easily pass along a message just like anybody on our council can. So.
You're very right, Susan, about that. And actually, you know, I participated in some legislative summits in Washington with CEC, and that's exactly what they do. They spend 3 days teaching us to recite what the agenda 3 topics, and they teach us to recite, and pretty much they have like about 250 lobbyists in one day. So it's very true to do the same message. And I mean, with restraint, I did comment on that. Like Brian, there are times when you want to protect the child, and as I said in my email, it's like I have a comment, but I don't have solution how to make that language stick, because you have, you know, it's important to paint that picture that, let's say, a child strips. Are we going to let that child sit there? Timeout is one thing, but timeout, they can't leave. Are we going to try to protect their dignity and cover them up or put them in a separate room or something like that? Be with them. I don't know how to express that we protect the kids, that we don't do unnecessary seclusions. Oh, you're misbehaving, go in a room. Or use it as teaching strategy. It's not a teaching strategy, it's a momentary solution to protect the child and others too.
So my understanding is that under the proposed bill, this is the one, the 1200, and the part that talks about the restrained seclusion is under the section 6 of that.
Yeah.
But it says that it allows for the continued use of restraint.
Right.
It's just the exclusion that, so it says no school employee shall use a physical restraint on a student except as an emergency intervention to prevent immediate or imminent injury to the student or to others.
I thought that was erased.
Yeah, provided it's not used for discipline or convenience and not used as a substitute for less restrictive. Then it also talks about how you get intervention. So
Right.
Restraint is still allowed, so that's going to address your immediate harm.
That's the
thing.
same.
No.
Yeah.
No. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jeff, so that language in CERN from the State Department is a seclusion is a lower level intervention for an emergency response. So we're worried there will be more restraints. And Anna's example, they would have to report that as a restraint if they were hands-on in that situation, if a seclusion wasn't used. I think, again, this is going to take a lot of discussion to get the language right where you are.
Yeah.
I would advise a couple things here. One is to think about students, think about the current mechanisms in place. That's the training that's involved in the students. And I think, a seclusion, when people think of seclusion, and there were comments yesterday about cells and, padded cells and things like that, there are parameters around a seclusion room. Are those parameters monitored? Right. So do they meet the criteria that they're supposed to have, and who oversees that? That's something for you to think about. Like if seclusion isn't removed completely, but to Anna's point, a seclusion could be in a hallway. It could be in the classroom itself. It could be in the office in the school, where they don't want other students to see a student while they're stripping or having this behavior or what's happening. So there's different levels, and the Office of Child Advocate, for example, has their experiences based on their investigations. Right. Is that widespread across all of our schools? That's the concern, and that's where the advocacy came to remove that as a response. But it's not and I don't mean to be disparaging in any way, but it's not a simple removal and then all of a sudden kids aren't secluded, because that's why where we said in our testimony, if that's the case, exclusionary timeout really has to be looked at about what the definition is. To Anna's point, the difference is that the student is allowed to leave or allowed to move. So we have to think about students that have self-injurious behaviors, and that padding is there so that students don't injure themselves, or that there's other sensory materials. So we need to acknowledge as a council that that the school districts have the tools and the mechanism and the training to be able to respond to these behaviors, but also to report the behaviors so that they can be analyzed and looked at on a regular basis. So I'm going on a little bit about that, but I think if as a council you look at, okay, what are our priorities as a council? What are our tasks? Like your role is to consider the unmet needs of students with disabilities, right? So is there a need out there or an issue around seclusion that you can speak to and say, I think, everyone is on board with reducing the amount. It's stressful, it's traumatic for the student and the staff, all of those different things. But if you remove that, does it have unanticipated consequences? It's almost similar to let's get, with discipline.
Yeah.
If schools can't expel students, right? But that behavior still happens, what are the mechanisms that are in place so that it's true exclusionary discipline doesn't lead to, corrective behavior and positive results in that positive trajectory. But when those things happen, when a student brings a weapon or when those other things happen, what mechanisms do the administrators have to respond to them without increasing, back to seclusion, without increasing restraints or calling the parents to pick that person up or calling emergency services to remove the student. And the other thing to keep in mind is our data. So I mentioned yesterday at the hearing that 40% of seclusions in our state happen once per year. So in our 5 minutes or less. So that's just something to keep into context, is to understand the data. There are students that have a significant number of seclusions, but it's a very small population.
Yeah.
And the teams are meeting. Are the teams meeting, and do we have like accountability and mechanisms to oversee that? Again, that's another thing for the advisory council to weigh in to say, we think there should be, more stricter mechanisms, or maybe you feel like seclusions should be removed and that there's other, Jen, you were talking about exclusionary timeouts and reporting those instances. So there's a whole lot to kind of unpack with this, and to be able to provide full circle back to Susan's point. I think what you can do in your testimony is, where does the advisory council feel come down on these emergency procedures? Is it an elimination of, or is it a reduction of, based on the teams that are working those students? And then what responsibility does the state have in monitoring and training and oversight? And what laws do you feel like the laws that are in place are not sufficient? If you think about it that way, then you could recommend alternatives to the legislature, or you may agree with it as written, which some organizations do right now.
Yeah, I'm so concerned about causing some unintended outcomes that are going to be much more harmful. And rather than doing something themselves, they're going to call the police. That's a lot more traumatic for the students and the staff and everyone. We don't want that.
That was like my concern, because, you read all the articles, and like I think we all know that the Hearst publication had all these different articles about restraining seclusion. They had statistics, and they were painting it, in a completely negative way. And when I started to write this stuff, and I'm like, well, it hit me. I go, well, wait a minute. I go, I'm not really an educator. I'm not on the front lines. I'm not there. I actually don't even have a child in the school district right now. I mean, he's kind of transitioning. So I was thinking, that's why I stopped writing my letter, saying I might be, I'm just kind of following, supporting the thing that's there, but there might be others that are saying, no, we don't want to. We don't want this. So I think that we have to come up with, as a council, we have to come up with a position.
Yeah.
Just so you all know, and I think I've shared this in the past, but we have annual reports for restraint and seclusion, and the data are completely accurate. So if there's information or facts that you want to check, there's significant breakdown of the restraint and seclusion. Sorry for making you dizzy here, but we break out by demographics, we break out by gender. The time frame that I mentioned by grade, it was said like which students by grade. You can see like the kind of decrease as students get older. And here's our breakdowns by ethnicity. This is what I was mentioning before, where it's just about 40% have one incident. And then the time frame is, but then you could see the populations. These are even, these stars mean that there aren't enough data. It's too low and they need to be suppressed. So this would be 6 students or less anytime you see a star like that. And then, there's counts by APSEPs, LEAs, it's not just APSEPs where these incidents happen. You can see it's about 50-50 between approved privates and LEAs. And you can see the injury counts here too, which is really important. And across the LEAs, so this would mean there's 6 injuries or less. So these are data. And then we also have the timeframes. So it's again, and you may see a data point in the newspaper or hear something, but now we get asked a lot about, well, what if these data aren't accurate? Because we're really relying on the schools to report that.
Right.
So if an incident happened and wasn't reported, we would have no way of knowing that. We don't know what we don't know unless a parent or a student reported that. So that's a concern, right, for students, like to protect students, especially our students that have challenges communicating with their families or communicating with their teams. So that's why it's not a behavior intervention plan, it's an emergency response. But I don't envy you all, because this is only, again, one small section and part of the entire special education bill, but there's a lot to unpack. Hi, Lena.
Yes, Brian, what I was going to say, as a parent with a special needs child that is extremely aggressive, that she goes to a behavior school and then she's being restrained in maybe 3 or 4 times a week, is a very hard topic, because I don't want my daughter to be restrained. Of course not.
Yeah.
Because, they have black and bruises. She cut herself. This is, she's very aggressive. At the same time, I want to protect the teachers. What happened with the paraprofessional, everybody who works over there so hard. I'm really concerned that all these people that are working in the school, they are going to quit, because they are not going to have something to control this kind of population. I know that there are all the children with disability, they are so aggressive, but I can see a lot in the children with autism that they are very strong. And my daughter is not heavy, she's tiny, but the strength that she has, it just is brutal. Then sometimes they had to really hold her between 4 people, and she's lower than my height, that I'm small. Then I want to find a way. I want really to find a way, and I know that this is going to take a lot of maybe meetings to try to figure it out, how we can do, how to keep them safe, how to keep the staff safe. Then it's going to be hard, but that's why we are here. Thank you.
Lena, thank you for saying that, because it's 99% of the people, paraprofessionals and teachers, are there because they love their job, they appreciate their job, and they're not even thinking of themselves. They're thinking of protecting that child and all the other students in a 911. That's like, oh my God, they get this protective feeling, and they don't want to really, they want to explain to the police why our kids are doing that, why they might spit at them or kick them or swear at them. It's the manifestation of the disability. It's not, they may not understand. So like I said, I'm not clever enough to come up with a language. All I know is what it is. And, if we can come up with some language and help legislators understand, paint them a picture of what it is, that would be.
The other thing I'll say too, Anna, if you don't mind me using this as an example, since it's kind of pertinent to us, is in the past, there have been bills that have come out where, for example, our CONCASE members weren't in agreement necessarily with the State Advisory Council's position, which is okay. So, so CAPSEF may have a response that's different than the Advisory Council, and CONCASE may have a different response, or the developmental DDS contact for us on our team. So that's okay. The importance is that, like you said earlier, Susan, you hear the different perspectives collectively and then are able to put forward something where, people understand and that they know they've heard. But I just wanted to mention that too, because some of these topics, to your point, Jeff, are, if there was a vote, which this isn't a vote, there would be, kind of probably differing opinions on what should happen moving forward.
Yeah,
And just to back that up, CAPCEF, so APCEPS and CONCASE are preparing or did prepare a statement. And I can proudly say that I think from the conversations, it's pretty much this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want the unintended negative outcomes. We don't want, and they're very focused on that civil action piece also, because, and it's similar to what we're seeing with police departments now. And what is it causing? It's causing that we have shortage of police officers. So we don't want to increase the shortage of educators and people that want to go in a field, because they're going to be personally sued if something happens. And if they deserve it, I'm all for it. But again, 99% of the people truly are in the field because that is what they want to do. They don't want to make 4 times as much being a banker or a financial advisor or something like that. They want to work with children. And they want to work with children with special needs, with challenges to help. So that will be their response. And again, if I had the language to share here, I would. They're just expressing concerns with those parts of the bill without suggesting the language.
Maybe
or
we should start a
modification.
Google Doc to
Yeah.
capture all of our thoughts, and if we read some of the other members' testimony, I'm going to bring it back to the student. There's no research that shows that restraint and seclusion is helpful for students, and there's actually research that shows how traumatizing it is. So one thing that this bill lacks is really what people should be doing instead. And I think this part wouldn't even be on here if people felt like restraint and seclusion was being implemented only in emergency situations when it's supposed to. Just this week alone, I've spoke to multiple families of little kids who have been restrained or secluded for things like eloping into the hallway. So I think it's something that's been coming up a lot at our call center. And, Brian, thank you for showing the data in your report, but that data is based on what's reported to you and based on if it's being reported accurately to you. And I have personally seen some of these so-called seclusion rooms, and I think if there were better monitoring systems in place, more accountability for when people are using it inappropriately, and there was more transparency, if people could actually see that it was actually being followed through, that could also make a big difference. But it should be used as a last resort, and more focus should really be put on what are the interventions to help prevent that.
That's so, Jennifer, as you're talking, my brain is going, so that may be the solution to it. Working on a language that speaks to the accountability if somebody does do something that they were not supposed to. Why? I don't know how else to clarify, what is an emergency. It does pretty much say when there is a danger of imminent danger of life-threatening injury. So if a kid is running onto the road or in the road, are you going to stop them or call the police?
Are you going to restrain a little kid for kicking someone? Or
that is
are
absolutely
5 adults going to hold a child down because they threw a pencil? You know, there's so many ridiculous things that are happening and they're not being documented. And I think that
Yes.
people are doing the right thing. You know, there are still a lot of kids who are being impacted by the other people.
And that is where we need to focus on those restraints. Why would you restrain a little kid, you know, even a big kid, for breaking a pencil? I always say to staff, if somebody throws a chair and breaks a window, are you going to restrain? No. If that is it, they go like, oh my, what just happened? And they're finished. No, you're not going to restrain. But if they throw a chair and then they go for a table, or maybe they're going to jump through that window, that is when you intervene.
Thank you. We're coming up on 12:41, just to let everybody know.
Yeah, and Anna, literally what you just said was a very good example, maybe, or something, an example of some sort like that.
Right.
Put in a Google Doc. Jeff, can you start a Google Doc? I actually know how to use those.
I don't really know how to do that, so.
I can start it and I'll send it out to the group.
So, yeah, because it's interesting what we're saying is like, you know, as we're talking about this and what I was doing yesterday and the day before, you know, you read the, you read the bill that's proposed and it all sounds, you know, kind of like, and the articles that were in the paper and you read all that. And then I'm reading like the opinion piece that was submitted by Seek CT, you know, for Section 6, and they're like, and I'm reading like various. There's like an attorney, Ann Tremanis, who I know, and like so I'm reading what she's saying. I'm reading, and everybody has the same like. There's no that anything it's more harmful, etc. And so, but then I'm sitting there thinking to myself, okay, well, on the one hand, I was like energized after reading those. Oh, we should come out and, you know, in favor of the bill to, you know, ban seclusion, you know. But then I'm saying, well, I'm not the one that's on the floor, and I'm not the one that's going to be in these situations. Kind of what Ann is like saying. So I really don't know which way to go. Of our entire group, right? Is it the entire council or just the executive committee and of the legislative committee?
I believe it's legislative committee because it goes from legislative to executive.
Exec.
I would suggest that we also put exec in the comments, only because we're going to have to go to the exec to see what they say, and if we all said yes, come out, you know, we want route A, and the exec says no, we're not going to do A, we've kind of spent our time. So why don't we do that? Would that be okay with everybody?
Yeah, that's great. And then are we also commenting, Brian, I noticed you had put in that we should have a member on the task force again, so we should include that in. I could always pop that in. And are we
anytime I see that, yeah, that's our automatic response, is to recommend the State Advisory Council.
Right. That's wonderful. Thank you. And then para educators, are we working on doing anything on that?
Para educators, I am voting full-heartedly, representing APSEPs, that APSEPs be included. Right now, they're not. It is run by unions. Our paras do not belong to that union necessarily. For example, our paras belong to 1199. So, you know, and they're excluded. And if we exclude them, what is happening in those APSEPs? Why is there no voice? The students with most challenges will go to an APSEP. Students that cannot be served in public schools. So
I would advise you to weigh in on that, just because of the percentage of paraprofessionals and paraeducators that support students with IEPs.
Okay.
And there is language in there about the paras being part of the Professional Development Evaluation Council, as well as the getting information about the IEPs, their preparation for PPTs, and then how they would have access to their supervisor if needed to explain their role in implementation.
Yeah, one thing is the IEP, paras needing to have access to or review the IEP. What most what most schools do is prepare lesson plans based on the goals and objectives, and that is much better for the para to have access to and specific training on.
Yeah, there is some bargaining information in there too, Susan, about
Mhm.
like the base rate of pay and things like that.
Yeah, and
So
I know it's tied because
the school,
I
yeah.
understand the whole thing. Yeah, I know how. Yeah.
And it's tied to municipalities, which
Yeah.
APSEPs are not employees of.
Yeah, Anna, you had made that comment earlier. Yes, I know that.
The
Are
role
we-
for us in the Google document, we won't add to or contribute to or comment on unless you ask us for questions or data or clarification.
Okay. And
Do
well,
you
clarification.
still want a link for it though?
Sure.
Or no?
Yeah,
Okay.
you can include us. Absolutely.
And then the section where if a teacher refers a student to a 504, they won't have any retaliation. Are we allowed to support that? Because I know we don't do 504s, but I believe OSEP is reevaluating that, correct?
No.
What do you mean, Susan, that they're reevaluating?
No, yeah,
No.
for us, 504 is not under our purview as a council, but
Okay.
as individuals, you could,
Okay.
and
Okay.
like in your other
Okay.
roles.
Okay. Great.
I apologize. I have to jump off, for another meeting. So thank you, and I will send that out later today. Okay.
Okay.
All right,
All right.
Jen, thank you
so
for so
much.
much for everything.
Thank you. And Brian, we know you're super busy. You got a haircut and everything.
I'll leave you. When did I have time to do that? No. But thank you. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or if we can help provide information. And again, we're happy to review language and to provide feedback, but we won't be, contributing in that sense.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right. Thank
I
you
think
so
we-
much.
Thanks,
I'll
Brian.
be in touch and don't hesitate to
Yes.
reach out. Thanks for the
Okay.
work that you're
Mhm.
doing. Much
I know
appreciated.
I know Klemkowitz is an
Bye,
Irishman,
Brian,
so happy
Susan,
St. Patrick's
Amy.
Day.
All right. I'll look forward to
Thanks,
that.
Jeff.
Jeff, thank you for all that work. And Brian, thank you for sharing all the information with us. Thank you, guys.
you.
All right, guys. So do you want to just, for the remainder of us, you want to just say, we'll wait to see what's being passed around? Because it's interesting, because I wanted to make sure which way that, was falling, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and it's like, I think we're all agreeing. I am in full support of everything that Jen said, completely. To me, why a 5-year-old would have to be restrained for any reason, I don't even know. Can't you? I don't know. I'm gonna reserve my judgment for that, but I
It's,
to-
well, so as the attorney for the city, and I represent the police department, this reminds me of, like, this should be called the Special Ed Accountability Bill, like the Police Accountability Bill. So it's never the use of force that's the problem, it's the abuse of force. So it's
yes,
not the use of restraint, it's the abuse of restraint.
that's it.
That's the problem. So that's
Don't
kind of
forget
where.
that. Don't forget that Google Doc's coming. Don't forget that word.
Google Docs.
Well, you like that phrase?
Oh my God.
Yeah,
I
like
think that phrase, you might have something that, and that's what it is. It is the abuse, or, we're all humans. Your adrenaline is rushing and everything.
Right.
And what supports do we build in besides the ongoing training? But no training is going to stop that adrenaline. So it has to be the right person, it has to be the right training, and it's all very beautiful. I am on the floor, well, not quite on the floor, but yeah, I am, many times. And I am so proud of my profession, how well most of the time we're able to kind of help the child just turn it around, So, but there are those times and kids get hurt. And yes, restraint does not do anything good for the child. I can't see what good it would do except to protect, maybe. And we're not going to have data because it's an exception of an injury. We don't have data for that.
Okay. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, reading all the commentary in the beginning of the year, I just wanted to get a feel from CT because I happen to know attorney Andrew Feinstein. He actually represented our family for my son, and I knew him. I said, "Hey, Andy, I just want to let you know I'm with the legislative committee, and I want to know what you guys are coming with." And and I know from years past, there's a cautionary tale that comes back. I know Brian Kosker said, now, Jeff, they're like an advocacy group, don't necessarily, and I understand that, but it's always good to get the feel for how others are thinking, because you look at all these comments and a lot of them are like, there's no reason why you should do that, but then I'm sure if I went to Rick Rausi and said, hey, Rick, what do you think about that? He goes, hey, there's times when I actually saved a kid by being able to hold them, so.
That's exactly it, yeah.
So, okay, are we good
Right.
here then? And then
Yes.
we'll pass that around.
Google Docs.
Google Docs.
Okay. All right, thanks, guys.
Okay. Bye.
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 Bye.